So I fired, and he died. And his 8-year-old son was there, saw it happen. Was at his house in front of his family. And then not many years after that, I was suffering the same way, and I wanted to die. And it was like I killed myself. Every time I pulled the trigger on that guy, it was like I was killing myself. I was ready. I was willing. I was so sick of the life that I was living and the person that I had become. I was willing to do whatever it took. I cussed every bit of the way. I fought people, every bit of the way. I could tell you, a lot of people find that a weakness, but being on the other side of it, you will never meet a more badass person than somebody who has stared down those demons, went toe to toe with them, and come out clean on the other side. That's real strength.
Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Robert Greer, a former law enforcement officer and now advocate at Warrior's Heart. After 17 years in law enforcement, including working on FBI task force and crimes against children, Robert faced PTSD and addiction. His journey to recovery has been a mission to help others. He now shares hope through Warrior's Heart and his podcast, High Speed Chicken Feed. Robert, I'm just going to leave it right at that. I don't want to take any of your thunder. So if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give a little introduction. I sure appreciate you joining me.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That introduction was great. That did sound like something beautiful, something thunder when or something like thunder, but when the actual story is more like a fucking train wreck. But that's the way it happens sometimes. We don't, as Jelly Roll put it, and thousands of others in the AA program, we don't come to AA on a winning streak. And I definitely wasn't on a winning streak when I came through here. But ever since then, I have been. It wasn't easy to see initially, but looking back, it's I this quote from Kierkegaard quite a bit. Life can only be lived forward and understood in reverse. At the time, it didn't make any kind of sense. It was horrendous. But looking back, I'm like, oh, shit, I get it, And it is a beautiful story, in my opinion. But the background of that is, I worked in law enforcement for almost 17 years. Now that's, as a paid actual bona fide law enforcement officer, I did store security while I was in college. In Louisiana, you have to be 21 to be a law enforcement officer with the vast majority of jurisdictions. And while I was waiting, I went to college and got an associate's degree in criminal justice and caught shoplifters for a while. No real fun stories from that, but I don't really count that in my law enforcement experience. But my official law enforcement career began in July of 2001, July 19th of 01, with Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office in Shreveport, Louisiana. That's where I started. Like most agencies, especially in Louisiana, you start off in the jail, get your feet wet there. Had some challenges going in. From a medical standpoint, I guess you could say maybe a stroke of bad luck. In 01, October of 01, like I said, I got hired in July, went through the academy during 9/11, graduated 2 days later. And then in October, I had 4 wisdom teeth cut out. Was on the way home with the then fiance, now ex-wife. And, I was still a bit out of it from the anesthesia, caused her to run a red light. Got hit on both sides, C-boned on both sides, and broke my back for the first time. Compression fracture to the L2 vertebrae that time. I bring it up, just because it factors in later, but, it was just an accident at that time. It kind of set my training back a little bit. I was on FTO status. Anyway, recovered from that, did stuff in the detention bureau, worked on the emergency response. Well, I trained for the emergency response team, never was assigned to it, but worked the housing units, worked compliance until I transferred into detectives, went to financial crimes. Was also a hostage negotiator during that time frame, which is kind of a part-time assignment with the agency I work for. But man, life was good up until June of 06. We'll put it that way. June of 06. Life was good, man. I was living my best life. I had a college degree, had gotten married in December of 01 to somebody I'd been with since we were kids. Started having kids, living the American dream, bought a house, all that good shit, right? Mm-hmm. Had Had my son in May of '01. Actually, his birthday is in 2 days. May of '01. Excuse me, '03. I had my son. And then my oldest daughter came along in May of '05. Right after that, I got transferred to financial crimes. Had bought a house. Everything was great, man. Um, in June of '06 is when I was asked to be on a new task force. Didn't know what it was, just was trying to please the supervisors. They told me how to do with computers. I'm like, yeah, sign me up, man. Anything I could do to make myself look better for them, right?
Mhm.
But it ended up being the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. If you've seen Dateline NBC, you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into great detail, but that assignment began to, affect me quite heavily. I had some other things going on in my life personally at that time, but in reference to the job itself, it was a part-time assignment while I was working full-time as a financial crimes detective, So 1 week a month, we would meet over at the Bossier City Marshal's office and we would do our thing. We were trained by the Louisiana Attorney General's office, and looking back to that very first week in June of June of '06, man, those images that they showed us, they're just right there. They're forever etched into my mind. The very first images of child exploitation I ever saw they're still just as vivid today as they were then. But it filled me with the desire to put all those sumbitches in jail and rescue every one of the kids that are out there suffering, And I took the assignment serious, and as it turns out, I was pretty good at it. Who would ever thought that a bald-headed white dude that would be very good at pretending to be a teenage girl on the internet,
I think I could pull it off too. So
I bet you could, man. I bet you could.
Just the hair,
Exactly. But I threw everything I had into that assignment because I had kids and I saw what was happening to these kids. And of course I knew that kind of stuff was out there, but I never was confronted with it quite in that way. So yeah, I started making as many cases as I could. Later on, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but later on that assignment took on many different roles. Portraying the juvenile female in a chat room is one thing. You catch the I guess you could say the low-level pedophiles, but the ones that are really out there creating the content and really abusing kids. I took on a different role as that of a single father with two daughters that was abusing his daughters, and would describe in great detail what I would do to those children. And I was catching the guys that were it's kind of like working narcotics, right? The street level guys are the producers. And with some of those guys I was encountering, those were the ones that were the craftier ones. You had to really get into their world and build their trust before they would start sending you images. And then when I would farm those cases out to other jurisdictions, if they weren't in my own, I mean, we were getting some pretty bad dudes, and rescuing some kids at the same time. But the psychological effect that it had on me, just pretending to do those things, pretending to like those things, was horrendous. I have three children. Eventually my third daughter came along in June of '08, and it just, I don't know, it created a little bit of a rift between me and my children. It's kind of hard to explain, but just the closeness, the physical closeness that a normal father would have with his children, especially his daughters, just wasn't quite there because of what I had seen and what I had pretended to be for a while. But that assignment did last 5 years. I could go into all kinds of detail on that. But the way I usually tell my story to folks that are interested in it is I try to tie in what kind of led to the substance abuse from both the mental and the physical aspect. And then how I began to recover from that, because that's why we're here. We could get lost in war stories all day long. Sometimes we call it trauma poker, right? Yeah. Oh, your shit's bad. Well, check this one up you. Yeah, check this out. And that's not what this is about. What this is about is quite simply how I went from being a teetotaler, somebody who didn't drink, didn't smoke, didn't cuss, was a Sunday school teacher with the wife for a little while, to being the total opposite of that, being a raging alcoholic, addicted to pills, vile temper, vile mouth, everything, you know. It was the job and a few things on my personal life that kind of changed me into that.
Mhm.
But up until this point in June of '06, I'd only been drunk that I know of one time.
Wow.
One time. Yeah. I grew up in an area where, you know, people went out in the woods and had keggers and parties and everything else, you know, all the time. And I was usually the DD. I was always afraid of losing control and not being of service to others. You know, if something bad went down, I wanted to make sure that I was able to help out. So I never drank. Uh, I went to some training over at Meridian Naval Air Station over in Mississippi. I don't know if you've ever been there, but
Uh,
it was law enforcement training for the Regional Counter Drug Training Academy. They did all kinds of training there. That's the first time I ever got drunk was on that little base bar there. I just wasn't a drinker. I was scared of it, you know. But damn, I made up for some lost time later on. Um, but in June of '06 is when I was assigned to the task force. Not long after that, I really began to have some physical problems manifest that ended up being Crohn's disease.
Hmm.
It'd go back and forth and say it was always there. More than likely, from a medical standpoint, it was, but it wasn't manifesting until after I was assigned to that task force. I mean, that's Crohn's, you know, stress really affects the body in a variety of ways. You know, if
Is
you've
that
ever
kind of
read
a
the body,
stomach disorder?
it
I'm not
is.
super familiar with it. I've heard of it, but I don't know kind of the symptoms.
It's inflammation in the digestive tract. IBS is limited to the colon. Crohn's affects you from top to bottom, from mouth to anus.
Hmm.
And it could create all kinds of problems. And for me, it was creating a tremendous amount of problems.
Hmm.
I began to, around that same time frame, began to have some unexplained weight loss, some bloody stools, mouth ulcerations, which I'd always had on and off most of my life. But at this point, I probably had 30 of them in my mouth, on my tongue, down my throat, on the uvula. And it was a sign of serious inflammation, which is basically what Crohn's is inflammation in the lining of the colon, where the good bacteria and bad bacteria are kind of at war with each other. And one of them's going to win out, and it ain't going to be you,
Yeah.
you know? It became acute in August of '06. Coincidentally, I was already in the hospital when it became acute. We were adding on to our house, and in short, had a little bit of a construction accident. Had a tarp on my roof because water was coming in where I cut the roof line back to put up a wall, and kind of got on that wet tarp trying to fix it and lost my grip and slid to the concrete below. Uh, Pro tip, don't put a fucking slip and slide on your roof. Yeah, it's amazing the velocity you get from the peak to the ground on a single story dwelling. I mean, it's unreal. But yes, I fell off my damn roof, hit the concrete below, tore my ankles up a little bit, fractured my left wrist, got 9 staples in the back of my head, and broke my back again. This time I had the compression fracture to the L3 vertebrae. So that's two times I have broken my back, and I got other broken bones. I go to the hospital. I was supposed to have a colonoscopy that week, but the insurance company, in their infinite wisdom, said you need a second opinion. So while I was there, I said, "Hey, can y'all go ahead and knock out that scope?" Sure, no problem. They got me stable, scoped me, said, "Yeah, you're pretty messed up." Started me on drugs. Didn't help. My colon ruptured while I was in the hospital. And I woke up in the ICU with about 50 staples in my stomach and a colostomy bag. I lost all but about 18 inches of my colon. I ended up staying in the hospital for a total of about 19 days, lost somewhere around 40 pounds, 45 pounds. Horrendous experience. Tubes down my nose, sick a lot, praying for death. I came out at about 160 pounds, you know, and right now, for reference, if you can see me kind of well, I'm 6'2", 225.
Yeah, you're a little
And
bigger.
yeah, so I looked like death when I came out of the hospital. But, you know, I was still alive, but I also had ample supply of pain medication. You know, started out with hydrocodones, but eventually elevated up to
I
Percocets.
lost your audio.
Did you?
Oh, there it goes. came back on.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was. You had an ample
Who
supply
knows?
of medication, and maybe it's,
Had an ample supply of medication. Started out as hydrocodone, eventually went to Percocet. You know, again, the first time I broke my back, I took my pain medicine and was able to put it down, walk away from it. Still wasn't a drinker. But late in the year of '06, I remember being at a restaurant with the ex-wife, and she was filling me in on what happened in the hospital because there's still huge gaps that I just don't remember. And I remember having a margarita because it tasted good, you know? Yeah. And somehow or another, that margarita, not even 2 years later, turned into going through 3 liters of tequila in a week, in my margaritas. With the margarita mix and, all the sugars involved, needless to say, I gained a little bit of weight back. Eventually I got up to 285, but, that's kind of beside the point. But after '06, man, that's when things really started to shift for me. I had the obvious trauma of what, happened at home, with the accident. But I always shrugged that off as just bad shit that happened, when I was off. But looking back, it had to have affected me. Most of what I was focused on was what was going on at work, and seeing all these cases with these kids and knowing that some of them I was going to have to close out without really being able to help anybody it created a lot of stress, a lot of trauma, a lot of anxiety, a lot of things that I still deal with from time to time. I worked financial crimes up into that point. If you get your credit card stolen, your wallet stolen, somebody drains your bank account, if I can catch them, great. If I can't, the bank's going to give you your money back.
Yeah.
Who's really at loss? The bank. Who gives a damn? So if I had to close one of those cases out without making an arrest, it didn't really bother me that much. But these other cases, I knew that kid was going to be out there suffering if I couldn't find him.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt. And I began to drink to kind of cover that up, to kind of cover up some of that stress and that pain. Same thing with the pills, man. It was probably 7 months after I got the colostomy bag that they did a reversal. They did a second surgery and removed the colostomy and hooked up what was left of my small intestines to my colon. Now, to me, this is funny, but if you're sensitive to some things, you may not want to listen to this, but it definitely
go for it.
It ties in 100% to the mental health aspect and to the pain pill addiction. So after I had my second surgery and they removed the colostomy, I had to learn how to do a few things over again, right? Had to learn how to have a bowel movement again, had to learn how to fart again, right? Which was no easy task. I was sitting at my desk in financial crimes and I had to fart. So, I kind of leaned over and tried to squeeze one out and just absolutely shit all over myself,
Yeah.
And it was one of those situations where it was, go home and start the day over again. Not just go to the bathroom and clean up, right?
Yes.
Now, as gross as that is, I bring it up because it's the truth. It's real. But on the way home to go home and clean up, those Percocets were right there in the center console of my unit. And I threw a couple down the hatch, not because I was hurting physically. I was fine physically. Mentally, I was a mess. Mentally, I had just shit myself at work like a damn child. Mentally, I couldn't control my bowel anymore. Mentally, I was still dealing with all the issues of work, family, stress, everybody else, everything else, and still knowing that I couldn't close out some of these cases. So mentally, I was a mess. And I believe that is when my Percocet addiction or when my pain pill addiction really began to kick off. Because I went from, having a normal prescription to manage the surgical pain as well as the back pain to going through 90 pills in 2 weeks, 90 of the Percocet 10s in 2 weeks most of the time, it was that much of a jump, it seemed. But as far as the career is concerned, I bring that up, mainly to get people to laugh, but also, especially you having been a veteran and a former law enforcement officer. If you hadn't shit yourself in the field at least once, I mean, right? You don't have to admit to
full-blown shit, but we've sharded a few times.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, that's when the pain pill addiction really started, and I was still going through some quite a bit of alcohol at the time, but it began to ramp up, and the effects that it had on my life. And I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff here, but the effect that it had on my life was noticeable. It wasn't noticeable at first. It's the slow, gradual build, right? As things begin to progress, as things begin to get worse, the anger started to come up quite often, the short-temperedness, the mood swings, the inability to process my emotions correctly began to really factor in and really pop up. Life continued, I was still uh, working full time, working financial crime, still doing the internet task force part time, still doing the family life as best we could. And eventually, June of '08, we had our third child. By that time, though, some things were noticeable at home, but they hadn't really blown up quite terribly yet. I think it was around October of '07. I was asked to move out of financial crimes and go to youth services full time. They were a little bit shorthanded over there, and since I've been doing well with the internet stuff and doing well with juvenile stuff, they asked me to move over. So now I'm working full time crimes against children cases.
Right.
Now that's regularly assigned cases of neglect, abuse, that sort of thing, physical, not necessarily sexual. Just any crime against a child in the parish, as well as the internet stuff. Anytime anything came up with internet tie-in, it was assigned to me. So I worked as many of those cases as I could, and had some go pretty south. I'm working with a counselor right now, one in particular, that still bothers me a bit to this day. Without going into specifics, I worked the case, wasn't able to bring it to fruition due to things that were completely outside of my control. And then a couple years later, the young lady attempted suicide. And when I met with her in the hospital, she blamed me personally for not doing anything to help her. And I had a lot of those cases that I just, I took personal, especially when the victim blames you specifically.
Yeah.
It began to weigh on me pretty heavy. I always took my job serious. But again, when it comes to the kids, you really have to take that serious. But it was just beginning to be too much. I spent 5 years investigating crimes against children, internet predators, child pornography, seeing hundreds of thousands of images, thousands of videos, ones with the audio. They still stick with me too, and saw just a lot of horrendous things. And by the summer of 2011, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was done. I was in counseling. I was on antidepressants. I was on a lot of medication for the physical issues as well. I was drinking heavily. By that time in 2011, I was probably 285 pounds. I like margaritas on the rocks. I was going through 3 liters
buddy.
a
Every
week.
time you say
Yeah,
that, I'm like, oh.
I know, man. You start jonesing, don't you?
Yeah, it's salsa and margaritas.
No.
I used to keep that shit in a jug in the fridge, and would, as soon as I got home in the evenings,
Yeah.
But I also couldn't sleep. I was having horrendous nightmares. So, if the sleep medicine will help you sleep without nightmares, and alcohol may or may not help you sleep without nightmares, imagine what both of them will do together, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
So, yeah, I was doing a lot of that. Very surprised I didn't wake up dead. There were numerous times I was on Ambien, and which is addictive in and of itself, problematic in and of itself. Mixing it with alcohol is 10 times worse. And there were numerous times I'd wake up and just soaked in urine, knowing that my CNS had gotten so low during the night that I was probably a few breaths away from not waking up. And how many people do we know that have done exactly that?
Yep.
Numerous times that happened. And with the pain pills, I wasn't buying them on the street. I'd go to the doctor, but every single month, the same shit. I'm going to get this prescription. I'm going to act right with it. I'm going to take them correctly. Right. And what's the first thing I did every single damn time is 2.5 right down the throat. And like, all right, next time I take them, it's going to be right, you know? And every 2.5 weeks or so, I was out, man, I was detoxing. You know, this is while I'm working. You know, I was taking these pills while I was at work. And when I would get home in the evenings and I would start slamming the margaritas until it was time to go to bed, and I would throw the Ambien down, wash it down with some copious amounts of liquor, and watch TV until I passed out because I was so scared of the nightmares. I was so scared of what I was going to encounter when I went to sleep. So that was my routine for a while. But in the summer of 2011, I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't look at the pictures, the images. We also would either we would interview the kids ourselves or we would go to the advocacy center and observe while the younger ones were interviewed. So I'm hearing the stories, I'm seeing the pictures, I'm seeing the videos, and I can't anymore. And I tell my lieutenant, I'm done. I can't do this shit no more. And basically, I was able to transfer out and go to patrol. I hadn't been on patrol at that point. Most agencies, you go to patrol first, then to detectives. They changed some things. So whatever, you know, I went to detectives first and started training to go to patrol. And I think it was late in the year of 2011, maybe January 12, I went to patrol and was doing that full time. It was a good change of pace. I liked it quite a bit, still do like patrol, even though I don't work it anymore, obviously. But I liked it a lot. But you know how patrol goes, man. I mean, you see a lot of the bad stuff out there too.
Yep.
With me, there was, of course, some bad crashes, dead babies. One of which was a 7-month-old that belonged to one of my coworkers.
Oh.
Yeah, one of the guys I got hired with, and she was at the same private sitter that I had recommended to him because that's where our youngest had gone. And it was a SIDS death. I mean, there was nothing anybody could do. And truth be told, she had passed before we were even notified. But I was second on scene. I did, you know, CPR and everything, and I had to tell him and his wife that she was gone. That stuck with me a long time too. But some of the other more notable things that happened while I was on patrol was I was involved in 2 fatal shootings. The first of which was June 19th of 13. And the short version of that story was he was a methamphetamine addict that was just having a bad fucking day. You know, I don't remember much else about his background, but, you know, he'd been in and out of trouble, but he just was having a bad day and was trying to take himself out. Wasn't able to do so. We were called to back up the fire department, and it devolved from there when he stated that he had a gun. Turns out he didn't. He was sitting in a car. When he popped out of the car, he pointed a metal object at me, which ended up being a pair of pliers. But you know how we respond, how we're trained, you know, to protect ourselves, protect the lives of others. So I fired, and he died. And his 8-year-old, I think his son was 8 at the time. His son was there, saw it happen. You know, was at his house in front of his family. And initially, I guess you could say I did okay with that. Of course, the drinking, you know, ramped up, but mentally, I suppose, rationalizing it. Initially, I rationalized it pretty well, fell back on my training. But then as the years progressed, I saw my oldest brother going downhill, and it was like I'd killed him. You know, he was suffering the same way. And then not many years after that, I was suffering the same way, and I wanted to die. And it was like I killed myself. You know, every time I pulled the trigger on that guy, it was like I was killing myself, you know? And I had nightmares from that for the longest, you know, the 10-ton trigger pull nightmare where you're squared up with the suspect and you just, you know?
Yeah.
I had those nightmares for years. My second fatal shooting was September 6th of 15. That was a paranoid schizophrenic that was off his meds. The difference there was he had actually fired around at officers and was trying to shoot officers after the chase we got into. So that was a little bit different. But again, it was a man that needed some help, you know? So it stuck with me. But during all of that, the pain pill addiction, the antidepressants, the alcohol, the effect that it was having on me mentally and emotionally was devastating. The way that I had become at home, um, I kept getting in trouble at work for the way I would talk to people. So I would not really talk to people or let any emotion out until I got home. And then all that emotion would spill out on the wife, the kids. And I behaved in a way that, frankly, if I saw somebody acting that way now, I'd try to whoop their ass, you know? But I was behaving in a way that I was completely ashamed of. And combine that with all the things that happened on the job, you know, the shame, the guilt, the remorse, just being ashamed of myself in general, just kind of fueled it, you know? It fueled the alcohol addiction, the pain pills. At some point, I had switched from liquor to beer because, you know, I was a few margaritas short of being a diabetic. So, I mean, my triglycerides were in the 700s. Normal is 125. Mine were in the 700s. So I'd switched to beer, but I was still killing, you know, a 15 pack, 18 pack a night. So it wasn't exactly getting much better. The problems I had on the job began to mount. The complaints against me, excessive use of force, the way that I would talk to people, just complaint after complaint. Now, for the longest, I blamed the sheriff's office. And in some ways, maybe I still do. But in working through a solid AA program, I saw where I was to blame in a lot of that. So I began to let go of those resentments. But, you know, that's the story up ahead. It all culminated in January of 2018 when I was terminated. In short, I was still experiencing some significant emotional issues, was very angry. My sergeant had sent me home. I was on midnight shift, and it led to an investigation. I was on leave for about 7 months while they were trying to figure out what to do with me. More fitness for duty evaluations. This time I didn't pass. I was not honest with them about drinking. I was not honest with them about my pill use. I was not honest with them about what was going on inside my head because I did not trust them.
Yep.
Which, of course, you know, is a huge aspect of our profession.
Yep.
But I did not trust the process. So I was suffering in silence. I did not raise my hand and say I was having issues until the very end. And even then, I did not address the alcohol or the pain pills. All I would address was the mental health. But they didn't really have much of a choice. After 7 months of leave and multiple evaluations, I was terminated in January of 2018. I was advised to, well, I was begging for something. They told me, well, you could apply for disability through our pension fund, which I did. And I've been drawing a 75% disability pension since July of 18. So technically I'm considered disabled, retired, you know.
Good for you. After all that shit, I mean, honestly, like guys in law enforcement deserve that. And to do another 20 years or 10, 15 years like that is brutal, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's a big pet peeve of mine when people do, you know, 15 years and then get cut loose and they get nothing except for mental health issues or alcoholism, and you know, it just ruins their life.
And it ruined mine for quite a while. I was surprised that I got what I got. You know, in Louisiana, it's a right to work state, and deputy sheriffs are fire at will. There's no civil service. There's no workers' comp. There's no union. It's a job. Mm-hmm. And when they fire you, that's it. They can fire you for whatever reason they want. And it was outside of the sheriff's office that I worked for that I was able to get the disability, you know, through our pension fund, through our retirement system. But that doesn't come with insurance. You know, no health insurance, and it was $2,028.22 a month for a family of 5. You know, talk about a significant pay reduction. We were already in a bankruptcy at the time because what goes along with mental health issues and substance use issues, mismanaging money. So we were already in bankruptcy, and I couldn't keep up. I was drowning. I was ready to take myself out permanent. Numerous times I had suicidal ideations. Numerous times I had a pistol to my head while I was still a deputy sheriff, and that was even worse. In August of 2016, I had switched my antidepressant. Again, not being open and honest about my substance use issues, I'd switched my antidepressant. from Cymbalta to Prozac. And the result was the suicidal ideations were so strong I couldn't function. So I was actually in uniform in my patrol car idling in the parking lot at my doctor's office with my wife, telling them what was going on, and she didn't really give me any choice. You check yourself in or I'm calling it in myself. So I told my lieutenant I needed some personal time, parked my unit, and went to the hospital and got PEC'd, Physician's Emergency Commitment Order. And I spent 3.5 days inpatient psychiatric hold for suicidal ideations. And that's why I was still a deputy, but I didn't open up to them and talk to them about that. They didn't, I really don't know if they ever found out about it, to be honest with you. But that's how bad it had gotten. So it was even worse at this point. Now that my career was gone, I could not keep up with the bankruptcy payments to save the house. Everything I'd worked for was sliding away from me. I was at my wit's end, and man, numerous times I was ready to end it, but I couldn't, because all I could think about was my kids coming in and finding me, and I did not want that for them. Later on in life, I learned that suicide was hereditary. Oftentimes if we do it, one of our kids is going to do it. That almost happened with me while we were still living in Shreveport. I had gotten very drunk, left a note, forgot about it, left it at my desk, and one of my children found it. And then later on in life, when she was facing some tough issues, she attempted suicide. Fortunately, we're both still here. And that becomes, I don't know, kind of my driving purpose. I will go through whatever I got to go through. I'll be damned if I'm taking one of my kids with me. I'm just not going to let that happen. But things, continue to shift and get a little worse before they got better. I'll kind of skip towards the healing part of it. We lost the house. Actually, I talked the wife into surrendering the house to the bankruptcy because I was done. And we moved in with her parents, which is 2 hours south of where we lived there in Shreveport. Moved in with her parents and was just basically existing. I was not moving forward in life. I was smoking weed every day. I was drinking a lot of alcohol, as many pain pills as I could get when I would go to the doctor. And by the way, April of 2019, I was at the trampoline park with the kids when I cracked the L1 vertebrae.
Cool.
So, so for counting, that's 3 times. But that last time was when it really bit me in the ass, because I was already on pills when that happened, and they had all these new laws in place, and it was 2 weeks before I even went to the ER. And even then it was probably another 4 or 5 days before I could get any pain meds. Just had to kind of grin and bear it, Yeah. I'm not existing. I'm barely existing. I'm not moving forward. I'm running a food truck for a buddy of mine, and it's not going well. The yelling and screaming at the kids and all the time, even though I wouldn't say things to them that was, designed to run them down, I was just angry about everything all the time. And of course, the result of that was they felt like they were being run down. Same thing with the wife. And my mental health at that point was such that I had a very low opinion of myself. We talk about positive affirmations and healing, right? And why they're so important, because a lot of the times when we're lost in our addictions and lost in that mental health headspace, we spend a lot of times on the negative affirmations. I'm a piece of shit. I'm no good. I cannot recover. And then we start voicing those. I started voicing those to the wife. You need to find somebody else. You need to leave me. I'm never going to recover. Making those agreements with myself, And why would I be surprised when eventually she took my advice and booted me out,
Mm-hmm.
But July 4th of 2020, that is exactly when it happened. This is 2 years after I'd lost my career. She was done. She was tapped out. I'd put her through a lot. And she asked me to leave. Now, that first month, I thought, well, I'm gonna put a Band-Aid on this, and I'm gonna save this, right? I was looking into going to a retreat out in California at the First Responder Support Network, the West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat. It's an excellent program, but they wanted you to be sober before you went. And I'm like, well, no problem. I got this shit, right?
Yeah.
Nah, I didn't have it. Not even close. Which is the real test of an alcoholic. If you think you might be an alcoholic, give it a shot. Put it down. Walk away from it. See how well you do. The shit hits the fan. I guarantee you what's going to happen if you're a real alcoholic. If you even make it that far, is you're going to pick up again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was going on with me. In July of 20, I was at that point where I was really finding out who I was. When the wife had put me out, a buddy of mine had a house that he had just moved out of into a new place with his family and was going to rent it, needed a handyman. So I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor trying to fix the place up, smoking, drinking, taking pills, trying to fool myself into thinking I can go to a short program, 2 weeks, and get everything back, right? And it all was going to be well with the world. How little did I know. I was still begging and pleading with the wife, but on August 1st of 20, she sent me that email. I had made this Facebook post, the kind of stupid shit we do when we're drunk, right? I thought it was somewhat poetic, but the next day I woke up to an email. She's saying because of that post, she was afraid for her safety and was going no contact with me and filing for separation. That was the worst day of my life. That was my absolute rock bottom, August the 1st of 20. And I completely fell apart. Now, that night, I had the choice. I had several things in front of me. I had a bong, no problem. I had beer, no problem. I had a pistol, was real close to pulling the trigger, but I also had a telephone. Guess which one's the heaviest? That damn telephone, right? Yeah. It was the heaviest, but somehow or another I picked it up. I'd been listening to a podcast called Friends in Recovery, and they were sponsored by a place down in Florida called the Genesis House, I think. Whatever it was, I called them. They weren't able to get me in for whatever reason. They referred me to Matty Fiorenza out in California, who was running a similar program and was affiliated with Save a Warrior. And he couldn't get me into a program out there. He did recommend me to Save a Warrior, but he also said, man, you need to call Warrior's Heart. And I looked at the website and I'm like, this is for military, man. I was just a cop, And he's like, no, man, they're for cops too. You need to give them a call. So I did. The following morning, he said, call at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and talk to a guy. You're going to talk to Mike Odell, and he's going to help you out. I'm like, yeah, what the fuck ever, I've been down this road. I'm going to get a call taker. It's going to shine me on. I don't have insurance, whatever. And the next morning at 10 o'clock, I call, and Mike answered the phone and said, hi, Robert, been waiting on your call. Fuck.
Oh, shit.
I threw up over the phone on him, right? Everything that was inside of me, all the hurt, all the pain, all the please, brother, help me, save me, came out just like that, just by him showing a little bit of compassion. I laid it all out. I didn't have insurance, didn't have money, but I was willing, right? I fit every requirement to a T. I just didn't have any insurance, but they had some methods for that too. They had foundations. And fortunately, by the grace of God, I was able to get in. I checked in August 18th of 20. I applied for foundations. They required me to put up a certain amount. I didn't have much of that, but shit, I started a GoFundMe. I sold some stuff that I had. I liked mechanic work, still do. I had a nice car hauler trailer with a winch on it, sold that, did whatever it took, man. I was ready to go. And I checked in on August 18th of 20. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. The work is hard. It's something I think about quite often, right? We've been through hard stuff in our careers, right? You have downrange, as a law enforcement officer, all of us have. We've been in situations where we needed help, right? Did you ever have a problem, calling for backup if you were downrange, needed QRF, or if you were on the street with somebody? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you picked up the radio and you went for it, right? There's no shame in that. But somehow or another, we fool ourselves into believing that nobody can help us, that there's some sort of shame in asking for help. The enemy that we're fighting at that time in our life is 10 times more cunning than anything that we ever face on the street or anything we ever face downrange if you're a veteran, right? Because this enemy knows every single one of our moves before we make it. It knows exactly what to tell us to continue to tear us down and believe that we can't move forward, to believe that we can't get help. It's the most cunning adversary that we have ever faced. And it also tells us to not reach out for help, you know, because it wants us where we are, because we're going to go completely down to the point where we're dead. And that's what that enemy wants, you know? So it's hard. It's hard reaching out for help. But man, once I got here doing the work, you know, this place is wonderful. I'm not going to lie. Doing the work is tough work. But it is so worth it. Now, I know I've spent a lot of time talking about the backstory, you know, of what got me here. But man, once I got here, I dove in. I was ready. I was willing. I was so sick of the life that I was living and the person that I had become. I was willing to do whatever it took. I cussed every bit of the way. I fought people, you know, every bit of the way. There was more than once where they had one of those come to Jesus meetings with me because I was hurting so much. But I participated in what they offered, man. I did the groups, I did the counseling, I did the art program, I did the K9 program. I have a service dog from here. Her name is Baby. She comes to work with me every day and hangs out in the office. I completed every bit of that. It was bumpy, but I did it. As soon as I completed the residential portion, went into sober living, stayed over there 5 months and did 2 months of IOP. And just learned that much more about myself. Got a sponsor, started working an AA program, and really letting go of those resentments of the wife and the job and all the other things that were there. February of 21, I went to Save a Warrior. Very good 1 week intensive up in Ohio, where they focus a lot on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. February of last year, I went to Warrior Path. They have a program now specifically for first responders called Struggle Well. One of my coworkers is actually in it at the moment. But it was another part of that healing journey. And so many wonderful things have happened along the way, man. I mean, I could I could fill up 3 or 4 more hours just talking about that. But I was able to face down a lot of the challenges that I had, a lot of the demons that were going on in my head. I was able to put those to bed. I sleep without sleep medicine these days. I don't take any antidepressants anymore. I don't drink. I don't take pills. You know, I don't do any of the things that I used to do that were completely tearing me apart. People actually like me now. You know, I'm tolerable to be around. But most importantly, you know, the spiritual connection, the faith that has been restored, the relationships that I've been able to reestablish with people, specifically my family. The wife divorced me, but you know, I have to take ownership in that, and she's remarried now, and I'm coming to terms with that. And it's almost 5 years now since she put me out, but I've been able to come to terms with that, and I didn't think I would ever heal from that wound. My children, they're a little bit older, you know, in their early 20s, late teens. That relationship was strained back then, but I began to work on it little by little while I was working on myself. 2 of my 3 children, the 2 oldest, live with me right now over here in Texas. And my youngest is here for the summer. So all 3 of them are at my house right now. You know, what could be better? And I'm in a great relationship with a wonderful woman. You know, just so many positives have come about from turning and facing those issues, you know. They kept telling me you have to feel it to heal it. When I came in, I'm like, the alcohol, the pills, that's not my problem. You know, I'm a normal drinker, right? These pills are for normal pain. But you got to feel it to heal it. If you're numbing out, you're not going to make any progress with the mental health issues. So, you know,
you got so many different areas that I could jump into. Unfortunately, I don't have tons of time today because my son's going to get off the bus in like 20 minutes. But
Sure.
Man, the first thing I kind of want to touch on is working in the child exploitation division. My neighbor, literally right down the street, you know, acquaintance of mine, he works in that as a detective right now. Like, what if somebody's in that field? What can they do, or can they do anything to protect themselves from the PTS that you develop seeing all this shit?
Yeah, and sorry if I rambled on too much,
No,
but
you're
yes,
good, man.
to address that question specifically, that's something that's really hard to stay on top of. When I was on the task force, the FBI, we were part of their task force as well, would require us to go in for what they call safeguarding, which is more or less a fitness for duty evaluation. Every couple of years, I think it was. If you're not in therapy, you need to be.
Yeah.
Whether you think you are or not, whether you think you need to be or not, that's some heavy shit to deal with.
Yep.
That's something that you have to open up and talk about. You can't, wade through that mud without getting a little bit dirty,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's just one little aspect of law enforcement. You were officer involved shooting, and I've had a lot of friends in law enforcement, and some of those guys have been in those and have developed their own PTSD, and but they're not really getting any help for it. They're just kept plugging away, and unfortunately, what's the statistic? 5-10 years after getting out of law enforcement, you're usually dead on one way or another: heart attack, alcohol, suicide, whatever. It's a brutal career, and this mental health and addiction portion of law enforcement, really, it's the administration that needs to take a better lead on helping guys out. I mean, man, for you to be able to get out of that addiction, like what is Warrior Heart doing as a program that you didn't try on yourself? Like, you show up there, what's kind of the program for guys showing up?
So one of the things that I wasn't trying was, sobriety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you got to feel it to heal it. I was in therapy for 10 years, not making any progress. And a lot of law enforcement officers, they drink normally because it's socially acceptable.
Yeah.
But going to a counselor is not, right? I can tell you which one is going to get you to where I was faster, Warrior's Heart, the way they address it, of course, is to get you free from the substances, but also to come face to face with the traumas that got you there. There's a reason why we numb out. The alcohol is just one aspect of it. So you got to get rid of what covers it up to really get to what you're needing to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that in a variety of ways. When I came in, I was handed a mission file, and we still do that, of course. And that mission file has a bunch of assignments in it, and it's specific to folks like us, the warrior community, military and first responders. One of the biggest projects that we do is called the Lifeline Project. You handed a long butcher sheet of paper when you come in. On the one side, you have your positive core values, positive people in your life, the others the negatives. And it's from beginning to end, from when you were born till now, the day that you're completing that, until the positives and the negatives. And for me, it was easy to see where I got off track sometime around 2006. If I can understand how it broke, I can understand how to fix it. Now, part of that project, of course, is to disclose, right? Mm-hmm. To stand up in front of a group of your peers and talk about all those things that you never wanted to talk about, the things that you would normally drink away. And that's lessons learned from the Hanoi Hilton. Now, if you know anything about Charlie Plum and a lot of those Vietnam veterans that were held in captivity for years and years, and how they never developed PTS or any of the related symptoms, is a lot of it has to do with disclosure, getting that shit out. Our secrets keep us sick, and that Lifeline Project is designed to do that. Standing in front of the room, all this shame, guilt, and remorse of the ways that I fucked up my life, or maybe I messed up on the job and everything, and standing in front of a group of my peers and saying, this is what happened, and those peers saying, yeah, man, I did that shit too. Yeah, that happened to me too. I fucked up the same way, brother. Don't be so hard on yourself. Oh, shit. Here comes the healing, right? Here comes the burden just lifted off your shoulders. The statements that I made in front of that group, one, were healing for me because I got it out, especially when some of the guys in my group was like, man, I was heavily abused as a kid. Thank you for opening up about that. I feel like I can talk about it now. Or, my child was raped and I'm so focused on the suspect that I can't focus on my daughter. Thank you for opening up about that. Well, shit, I began to heal, So that's one of the biggest things that we do is that Lifeline Project. And that's presented 3 weeks into your stay. A lot of people run from it because it's tough. I'm not going to lie. Wading into those dark recesses of the brain is tough. But the only way to heal it is to get it out. Now, obviously, this place isn't, just classroom work, meetings and whatnot. I'm sitting outside right now. Yeah, I know you can't really see it that well in the video, but this is the porch of Access one of the buildings that we have here that used to be our sober living. And over my shoulder here are in the Texas Hill Country are the hills out here from somebody that's from Louisiana. That's mountains out there, right?
Yeah.
But it's peaceful. It's quiet. There's a lot of wildlife here. This place used to be a corporate retreat for a large oil company. It's still set up that way.
Wow.
We have a canine program, equine therapy, wood shop, metal shop, culinary, fishing, the gym, the pool, all that stuff to go along with the heavy duty lifting you're doing in the clinical setting. To one, learn new ways to mitigate some of that stress and, deal with some of those issues. The jujitsu program is huge with that, because what happens in life when we get our ass handed to us, we flail about, waste a lot of energy and end up in a worse situation. What happens in jujitsu if you're getting your ass handed to you? You flail about, you waste a lot of energy, you end up in a worse situation.
Yeah.
Tuck your arms in, slow your breathing down, think your way through the problem and get back on top. Everything that they do here is specific. It's intentional. It's designed to get you back into the fight. The art program was huge with that. I did K9 and art while I was here, and those programs were huge with that.
How long is the program generally last for guys? Is it vary based on the individual, or is it kind of a process you just go through the program and you're done?
It's a minimum of 42 days, right? That's our shortest term. You can do extensions. I think they do 2-week extensions still. It doesn't count detox days, but 42 days is the minimum. Now, most places have a 28-day program. We find that, or the studies have found that for the first week or two that you're there, you're coming out of it, getting adjusted to the facility, being away from home. You're not absorbing a damn thing.
Yeah.
So there's an extra couple of weeks built into that to really let it sink in.
Man, we could talk about your story is incredible. And I know you got all kinds of knowledge that I would love to pick your brain on and find out a lot more about you. Because, being able to get yourself out of that situation and be improving your life and, being there for your kids now, like that's incredible. And that's hardworking. And there's a lot of people that were in similar situations as you and can't find their way out of it quite yet. I mean, if somebody's listening to this and they know they're on that path to divorce, losing their job, alcoholism, the whole 9 yards, any little bit of advice you could throw their way?
Don't hesitate to reach out for help. I mean, so few of us do because we don't want to lose that spot that we're in, right? We don't want to lose that competitive edge, that angst that we hold on to and drink away most of the time. We feel like it keeps us sharp. The last thing we want to do is take ourselves off the line, take ourselves out of the fight. But man, it's going to continue to get worse. And God forbid you should mess up with something in your system. That could have very easily happened to me, or you end up taking your life. Essentially, you're combat ineffective. What's day one academy stuff? If you can't get there, you're not doing anybody any good. And if you're not keeping yourself in check mentally as well as physically, you're actually harming your unit. So the best thing to do is to reach out and ask for some help. If you find that you're drinking too much, you can't stop. If you find that the nightmares and the mental health issues, the moodiness, the anger is so much that it's causing an impact on your family life, on your work life, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask for help. I can tell you, a lot of people find that a weakness, but being on the other side of it, you will never meet a more badass person than somebody who has stared down those demons, went toe to toe with them, and come out clean on the other side. That's real strength. That's real strength.
Yeah. Hallelujah, brother. I mean, you faced your demons, dude, and to deal with, what the child exploitation, which is the worst fucking thing I can even think of, hands down, like that's it. And then just being in the officer involved shootings and all, geez, everything that you've dealt with, man. I'm I'm proud of you for making it through it. I don't know you, we just met today. This is our first conversation, but literally not a lot of guys pull it off, and you should be very proud of yourself, and congratulations on the podcast and all the work that you're doing. If people want to get a hold of Warrior Heart, what's the best way to get a hold of them and your podcast?
There's a variety of ways to get in touch with Warrior's Heart. Well, you can use a hotline number of 866-955-4035. 866-955-4035. That's a 24-hour line. We answer the phones and admissions from 07 to 2300 Central Standard Time daily. But if you call that number, leave a message, you probably will get some of our overnight staff. We'll get back to you in the morning. 866-955-4035. We're all over social media, on the internet, warriorsheart.com. That's warriors with an S, warriorsheart.com/connect. You can chat live with somebody, probably me. But you can chat live with somebody. You can put in an online request for information. We'll give you a call back when it's convenient for you. There's a lot of ways to get in touch with us. We don't want you to hesitate to reach out and ask for some help. Podcast is the High Speed Chicken Feed Podcast. We're on, it's a goofy ass name. It's, of course, a reference to methamphetamine use. That was one of Kyle's DOCs. But we have a lot of fun with it. It's also a way for us to stay sober and bring the message of healing to other people. We're on Spotify, Audible, Google, you name it, we're out there, except for iTunes. The greedy bastards want too much money.
Yeah.
So
sure. Man, Robert, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time and sharing some of your story. And if you guys found value in this, please share it. Please check out Robert's podcast as well. And we'll put all the links in the description. Thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, sir. And if you ever want to have me back, I can spend less time talking about me and more time talking about other stuff. We can certainly do that.
I would love to have you back for real. We'll chat in a second.